Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this October 12th, 2021. Tonight we are talking about spirit attachment of the malevolent kind. And we have an old friend, Joy Keeling, used to be the original co-host of this show, here to talk about her personal experiences dealing with this very phenomena. I think you're going to find it enlightening, educational, and disturbing. But there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And tonight we're going to talk about how one overcomes demonic and spirit attachment. Stay tuned. Everyone, how are you doing tonight? I hope everyone is having a fantastic evening. I hope you get your feet propped up. I hope you have a wonderful drink, whatever you require to have a wonderful evening with us tonight. We are here with you for the next 3 hours. For the first segment, we're going to be talking about spirit attachment. And for segment 2 and 3, it's open discussion about the subject tonight. Or if there's something that's very much on your mind, we can talk about that too. Father Chris will be joining us for segments 2 and 3 as usual. So there's a lot to look forward to tonight. There's a lot to entertain you with tonight, but there's also a lot to educate you on tonight, because this is one of those subjects that I think there's so many misconceptions, and we're able to hopefully clarify some of that tonight. And we have a fantastic guest, Joy Keeling, to talk about that. But first, I like to take the questions from the ether. And last week, we actually had something from the Nicolean Network from Tiffany, who was in the chat room last week. And as you recall, we were talking about original sin. And I guess there was maybe some misunderstanding as to what her question was when it was extracted from the chat. I guess another reason to call in, please call into the show when you have a question. It's so much better. That way I can ask you if I need clarification. But honestly, I guess we didn't properly answer her question. So she came back after the show on the Nicolean Network and said, "Great show tonight. And I just want to make it clear with you, especially Bishop Bryan, since you likely weren't reading the chat, but I was asking if knowledge was actually the original sin. In a backwards kind of way, I have full faith and belief in God, not because of following blindly, but because of questioning everything and experiencing life, and more importantly, going through the dark night of the soul." We might even talk about the dark night of the soul tonight. It's very relevant to spirit attachment, and Joy is no stranger to it, so she can give you even more insight into it from someone who's gone through it and to a large degree conquered it. But the fact of the matter is, I think we were defining faith instead of answering Tiffany's question the way she was asking it last week. So I said, I'll take this to questions from the ether to start off this week's show and hopefully clarify whatever, misconceptions she might have about this. Honestly, she's asking if the original sin was knowledge. From a Gnostic point of view, it was knowledge of good and evil because the demiurge didn't want us to have it. That's the Gnostic worldview. That's not the conventional Christian worldview. The conventional Christian worldview would say that original sin was the disobedience. It didn't have to be any more than the fact that God told us not to eat of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. And we did. So the original sin was disobedience. From a Gnostic point of view, however, they take it a little bit further, a little more esoterically inclined. And they would say, well, it's actually because this is not the real God. Of course, Christians don't believe this, but Gnostics did. And, he was trying to deceive us by not letting us know that we were divine creatures, and trying to keep us subordinate to him, and using subversion to be able to accomplish that. So hopefully that answers the question. But no, knowledge is not the original sin. The original sin is disobedience to God. And even I would say from an esoteric, more advanced point of view, it's not even so much about the disobedience as it was about not aligning ourselves to the will of God, which is what we were designed and created to do. So by violating his will, by following after our own interests, and that's the ego always doing this kind of thing, then that creates the kinds of problems that lead to, original sin and all the consequences of original sin, which I should not have to tell you by now, is death. We all know about death, don't we? So that's hopefully, Tiffany, if you're listening tonight, I hope that answers your question. Okay. I said I'd answer it, and I did. Well, we've got a fantastic show tonight. I'm very excited about this. It gets us in line with the Halloween spirit, but it's not really, even though this show is about entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I actually designed Vestiges After Dark to be a more entertaining version of the original show, which was Vestiges of Christianity, which is a very sort of very serious theological podcast. And I mean, it was it's still very popular. People still download that show by the hundreds, even though I haven't done a Vestiges of Christianity in a long time. But I wanted to do something that was accessible to everybody, and not just people who are spiritually inclined from the Christian persuasion, not just people who are Christian or Catholic or, like talking about Christian theology. I wanted to be able to reach out to a large part of my audience, which are people interested in the paranormal because of Ghost Adventures, from how most people found me and know me. They know me from this show. So I wanted it to be a little bit entertaining, but educational at the same time, and provocative. And, these are provocative subjects. Paranormal is a provocative thing when you really break it down. There's not a lot of agreement in it. There's always a lot of arguing. The paranormal community is always in disarray. Everyone always hates each other. The fact that anybody works together in the paranormal field at all is really a remarkable thing, because there really is no cohesion in this field, which is really sad, and really works to the detriment of everybody, because it kind of prohibits, or limits rather, what allows us to, explore, discover when we're not working together. Fortunately, I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to make it better. I'm trying to use this show to do that. And tonight, we're doing just that, because we have a wonderful guest. You know her from the first seasons, season 1 and season 2. Then season 2 was a short season. But you know her from season 1 and season 2 of Vestiges After Dark. She's Joy Keeling, and she has been a student of mine for a long time. And she has been very serious about the paranormal and theology. She actually studied theology. In fact, Joy Keeling has had a lifelong fascination with the paranormal. This led to a bachelor's degree in theology, and she is close to finishing a Master of Divinity degree. She has researched religious and supernatural topics since childhood, when she would go through the encyclopedia page by page, volume by volume, searching for anything having to do with religion, mythology, folklore, and the Bible. Now she's an encyclopedia herself, and excited to share what she knows. She's been my student for over 4 years and a client for 3, studying metaphysics and herself, so she can better understand the experience of spirit attachments and help as many as she can with that information. That's the remarkable thing about this ministry, is I find that the real serious students and the real serious clients are always willing to use their own problems as an education point for others. And tonight we're going to be talking all about that. But first, we've got Sister Mary Joan with us. And how are you doing, Sister?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Good to be here. And yeah, we're in for an education tonight.
We are. It's fantastic that Joy is back with us, and she calls into the show from time to time, but this time it's all about her and it's all about her experience, and I'm very excited to welcome her back. Joy, welcome to Vestiges, formally this time, season 4. You've called into season 4, but you haven't been the guest, and now people can see you. You're there, not just on a voice on the telephone, but I know a lot of people might not have watched old videos of the problems that you suffered with when you came to become a client of this ministry, and we started working on a resolution for you. So I think briefly, for new people who might have just discovered this show, and because now we're on YouTube and we're doing the video thing, a lot of new audience members, numbers are different, numbers are much greater than they were when we started this podcast. So I think it'd be good to refresh people's memories, or introduce people to what made you, or how'd you discover me, and what made you become a client, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, hello everybody. Coming to you live from my throne, and this is an animatronic that I have, so nobody's like scared that there's a person here.
Is he going to reach for you during this this broadcast? Are we going to see the hand come out and like take you out?
No, he's not plugged in.
Okay.
I've got to put him back in his box anyway. I call him Booger. He's my undead paranormal butler.
Okay. So, I love it. Fantastic.
So, just so, everybody knows what that is. It's not a real person. So yeah, when I first came to you, well, first of all, I heard about you on Ghost Adventures, and I wasn't going to follow you at first on Twitter. And then I thought about it, and I was like, I'm working on a Master of Divinity. I need to, I need to connect with people who are, doing some of the similar things, because I kept having demon cases coming at me. And, I was rejecting it, kind of pushing them toward, getting help from other means, because I didn't have any way to do anything. I didn't know why they kept coming to me. And then finally there was a moment where I said, okay, I'll do it. And I surrendered to it. And then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm a theology major, and I got a degree in theology and working on another degree. And I'm like, you know what, if that's why I'm doing this, I might as well follow this guy on Twitter and just see what's going on. And then he started talking about this class, and I thought, man, that's everything I want to study. So I signed up for the class, and I was in it from day one, and just loved all of the content. And that's how it started. But then I was having issues with something in the house, and it had been affecting me for a while. But I kept thinking, oh, well, I can handle this, because most of the spirit encounters I'd had, I was totally able to handle it. It wasn't that big a deal. But this I couldn't get rid of for some reason. And the way it just kind of wove its tendrils into my head, I couldn't imagine setting it loose after a while.
Yeah.
And so when it started threatening other people, when it was attacking other people, I couldn't take it anymore. So, I reached out to you, and I filled out the form on the website like you're supposed to. And I flew out there not even knowing if I was going to get help or not. Because basically all I knew was I was going to Mass, and I was crossing my fingers, and somebody happened to cancel, and you were able to put me in a slot before I got on the plane.
Yeah, I remember you saying, what if I need an exorcism? I remember you being very concerned about that.
Yeah, because this thing, it caused me to cut myself at one point. And I just stood there looking at my finger dripping blood, going, it was numb. I just couldn't even think about it. It would hurt. But emotionally, I just kind of was numb. And this thing was talking to me, basically saying, I can control you.
Yeah.
And it kept talking about wanting to merge together. And I wasn't even looking like myself in those days. Like my appearance even changed. Like, you know, when I look at old pictures of me, like from high school, I had long blonde hair, but here I had like short brown hair and I kept dyeing it darker. And my face, honestly, didn't look entirely like me. Like I couldn't even recognize myself in the mirror. It was really getting weird.
Yeah.
And so when I came out to see you, I wasn't sure, you know, if I was even going to be seen. And of course, you know, found out after I landed and as I was driving out to go to the mission church, but before it was even open, like it was the soft opening.
Yeah, it was the soft open.
Yeah.
You didn't even have,
We had what we needed set up, and that was about it.
That's about it.
yeah, you didn't have the sign on the door even.
No.
Not yet. Yeah.
Like when I showed up Saturday, you had just gotten it.
Yeah, that's right. We
So
did.
I took the picture.
You have it. Yeah, that's a moment in history right there.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was just grateful to be there. And I remember hearing as I was getting ready to fly out there, I'm not going to let you get on that plane. And things just kept moving slower and slower. And by the time I got there, it was less than 30 minutes before the plane, they wouldn't let me check in.
Oh my.
So I was like, what am I going to do? I have to be there. And they managed to find a flight like right after that.
Wow, I didn't know. I don't know if I remember that.
Yeah, I did not get to get on that plane. And like the cut on my finger, I can see the scar. It was bright red. And it was just this reminder, I'm not letting you get on that plane. And I'm like, I'm getting on some kind of plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, then I flew out and I managed to get into a vehicle and driving. And as I'm driving, I got a call saying, hey, we can fit you in on Saturday if you can make this appointment. I was like, I can be there, you know, but when is Mass? Remember, I was confused about when Mass was. For some reason, I was like an hour or so off.
Yeah.
But then I got there and I kept hearing that I wasn't going to be able to even walk in there. I was like, then I'll crawl. And I had to walk in holding a cane. I had to walk in.
Yes, I remember
Yeah,
that.
you were pretty unsteady.
Yeah.
When
You were
walking in.
wobbling in actually.
Right.
Yeah, using the cane. I recall. I remember that now.
Yeah. And just sitting in the pew and I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop burping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a tough Mass for you. You barely made it through it.
Yeah. And, you know, I got up and took the Eucharist and I was better. I could put the cane away.
Yeah.
But I almost threw up on the way into the hotel room.
How long had it been since you had received Eucharist prior to that night?
Well, I had been going to the Episcopal Church the whole time. But
Yeah.
it just
And you weren't having the same reaction?
I wasn't having the same
in church?
reaction. So
Do
I
you
hadn't
think that
had,
has to do with the sacrificial nature of Catholic Eucharist versus Episcopalian?
Sounds like
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it's not considered valid by the by the Catholic Church,
Catholic,
because
yeah.
they don't use the sacrificial language, so they can't be in communion.
And you
that's
felt
something
you
they
felt the
confirmed.
difference between the two.
I felt the difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last time I had Eucharist before then in a Catholic church was probably a few years earlier. I had gone to a Carmelite monastery for the Feast of the Blessed Virgin.
Mhm.
So that was probably the last time before then.
I got you. Okay. Okay.
So it had been a while. I wasn't affected,
Yeah.
you know, by anything back then, but it would have been, you know, years. So, yeah, I came out and like I had a large breakfast. Like I ate food for breakfast and then came out to the appointment and you gave me unction. And what did I do? I threw up.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
You sure
throw up.
did.
The breakfast did not come up. That was the weird
No,
part.
That's right. It was mostly that mucus that I've
there's
talked
that
about
spittle
before.
that we typically see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a clear
With
mucus, and it's almost a hallmark of every serious attachment case that we've seen.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that really kind of surprised me was, wait a minute, my breakfast is in there too. What's going on?
Yeah.
Like why did I not throw that up too? But yeah, because that wasn't what it was. But I remember when I was in there, it felt like you unzipped my energy and reached in. Like I could feel like energetically, like something was being detached from me.
During the laying on of hands.
Yeah. And I remember you saying something about a wrathful spirit, and that, I kind of wondered, well, where did I pick this up? And of course, later on, after I had come back and started, thinking I was just fine, and then realizing, oh crap, I'm not. We kept wondering, like, where did I pick this up? Because I had done a lot of investigations. I had gone to, like in 2016 and 2017, I had gone to places and done like investigation events. I had investigated at people's houses. Where did I pick this thing up? But it turned out to be something, something else. It was not something I picked up from, investigating. It was something that I picked up after someone had died. It was someone I knew.
Right.
And so later on that year, I had started throwing up. Actually, the throwing up. What time? How are we doing? Okay, we've got plenty of time.
Oh, you're fine. We can go into the next segment if we need more time. That's fine. Don't worry about it. We've got the third segment tonight.
Going.
Yeah, just keep going.
So I you told me that I needed to, go take Eucharist and go to confession and, go to mass and just receive, and I didn't do it for a while because I'm like, yeah, whatever, I feel fine. Everything's fine. The spirit's gone. The things that had been happening before I left were no longer happening. And yeah, so I finally decided I was going to go to mass. And as they were doing the stuff, I got so nauseous, I had to run to the bathroom and throw up. And when I did, like my entire face turned red, like bright red. And I was wearing, I wasn't wearing a whole lot of makeup. I just had eyeliner on, but my entire inside of the eye socket was black from that eyeliner because I was squeezing so hard. Mm-hmm. And my entire face turned red. So of course I look up in the mirror after I've been throwing up, after I've been to an exorcist and I'm in a church while they're doing mass and I'm throwing up and I look like a demon. And I'm just like,
not the most ideal of circumstances.
No. And so it got worse from there. I made it home. I threw up 3 times. I had to go to 2 different bathrooms running across, and the security guard looked at me like pale faced. Are you okay? Because here's this person who's just throwing up and their face is red in the middle of mass. Like, yeah, maybe you don't need to be in a church. Are you okay? So I get home and it got so bad, I had to call an ambulance, and that was my first time ever being in an ambulance, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
No, that's not any fun.
No.
Yeah, I got to the emergency room and they found nothing wrong with me. So they just sent me home with, I had to beg for things to stop the nausea. And they just sent me home, and I've been in the emergency room about 3 or 4 times. It was 3 times before I got my gallbladder actually removed at 2 different hospitals. I went, between 2 different hospitals, I went 3 times, and I kept going to the clinic that I'm supposed to go to because I'm on Medicaid, and they wouldn't give me a referral to a specialist. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, there's something wrong with my gallbladder. And so, I finally, after a trip to the emergency room, my 3rd trip, I threatened a lawsuit, and they admitted me. And they said, yes, it's absolutely your gallbladder. As soon as the specialist looked at it, that's what it is. We're taking it out. And they had it removed. But the thing that started this illness was the spirit attachment.
Yeah.
And it was attached in the gallbladder liver area. And, I don't know how you perceived it. I know you can perceive spirit attachments, Bishop, but that was where I kind of perceived it was like, being around there and having that damage. And so one of the treatments I had was not just talking to a therapist, but also going to a massage therapist who's also a Reiki master and familiar with Chinese meridians. And every time I had a pain for like 2 years, and she would find some other place that hurt, or I'm having another, type of pain this week, it's always along the gallbladder meridian.
Mm-hmm.
And the gallbladder and liver are partners,
right,
that handle your frustration energetically.
Yeah.
The frustration and anger is in the stomach. So frustration and anger were most of what was coming up. And a lot of people may remember I was yelling at people all the time on Twitter. I enjoyed any time a troll came after you, because I would just go off.
Give you an opportunity to unload on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, energetically, like this was affecting me physically. Mm-hmm. Like it was going all the way to the physical reality where I'm trying so hard to keep everything together, and it's just not happening. It just keeps coming out. And sometimes I would have emotional outbursts and get sick at the same time, or sometimes I'd get sick and I'd be dealing with a trauma that had come up. But like this started a couple of months after I had come out to see you. And so I started, talking about how I needed to get, some kind of help. And when I had a, I called it a memory cascade. It was all these memories that just came up to the front. And I didn't know what to do with them. And it was so horrific. I sat there like an android glitching, I couldn't even function. And it turns out that those memories were what caused those were all traumatic memories that caused the later attachments that I came out to you for.
Right.
But these memories were the ones being suppressed by the wrathful spirit, because he didn't want me to remember. That was one of the last things I remember, him telling me, was he didn't want me to remember my repressed memories.
Yeah.
And so I remember, once all of those came up, like that was when I started piecing it together, who the wrathful spirit was and when it attached to me. I remembered the moment that it happened.
And prior to that, you had no memory of this at all.
I didn't even think about it. I would sometimes think about the traumas, because I was actively trying to work through my traumas and heal myself. But whenever I thought about those things, I thought, oh, that's nothing. That didn't affect me.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? Of course that affected me.
Yeah.
This was someone who molested me at the age of 5. That's something you're going to remember. That's something that's going to affect you. That's a trauma that doesn't go away. It's inside you. And you have to try to find a way to heal that. And scars will always be there. But it didn't occur to me until after the spirit was removed, who it even was, because he was actively suppressing the memories that involved him. And that's how he was attached to me, was through our connection, through our memories, through the time we spent together, and the fact that we had half of our energy in common. Because, of course, when I came to you later that year, which was 2018, I came out there with a cursed bell that my father had used to molest me.
Yep.
And that was the story that I told everyone. And, we told it on, Vestiges After Dark. It was a great episode. We were all gung ho. We were going to do an exorcism on the bell. And we aired that later, and something just kind of fell through. And that was, because we thought there was really potentially some kind of demonic attachment, and it turned out to be a tulpa that I had created out of the trauma inflicted on me by what my dad did to me with that thing.
Yeah.
And, so it took some time to realize, oh my gosh, that spirit attachment was my dad. It attached to me the year he died. Like, I saw him in the moment of his death, gasping for breath and reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember falling back, and I don't know if I was out, because I was alone. So I don't know if I passed out for a moment or what, but I remember being knocked back because of the spirit.
Right.
And it had just been kind of passively attached to me until I tried to heal myself and started thinking about my traumas and trying to work through them. And those traumas came up, and I couldn't work through them because, well, that didn't affect me. Yes, it did affect me. I have to work through this. And the only way to do that was to get rid of him. So once I did, I was able to start working through my traumas. Of course, that was with my my psychotherapist. Had so many therapists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she and I worked on how to calm me down. Like, the first 6 months, I'd say, of going to that therapist was just her teaching me how to calm myself down so I could talk about these things. Because, it really was horrific. And we never really got around to those parts because we had to deal with things as they kept coming up, because more traumas were coming up every day. And it became harder and harder even to be your co-host.
I remember. You can hear it. If you go back and listen to those episodes, you can hear the degeneration of your functionality. It's very obvious. But if you don't know what's going on, you just might think, oh, well, she's not feeling well, or she's having an off day. But, we knew obviously behind the scenes what was going on and what you were struggling with. Yeah.
And that's something that not a lot of people even know about, that you were actually talking to me on a weekly basis. And the only reason, because that was something that you offered me because I was, donating a lot, and you were like, well, let's do this and help you out here. Because you offered me pastoral counseling for, I don't remember how long it was, but it's not something you offer anymore. It's not something you do long distance.
No,
so
typically.
I was a special exception all around.
Well, you were a student, and like you said, you were one of our most dedicated benefactors. You were a student. You have the background in theology, so you understood a lot more about your situation than the average client would have. I wanted to see what I could do to help, even if it was remotely. So taking calls, if that's the only way we could connect, and see if I could help you work through some of the spiritual side of this, provided that you kept your commitments to your psychotherapist and maintained conventional counseling, because that's one of my requirements. If we're going to be doing, I don't, like you said, I don't do pastoral counseling anymore, but when I was, one of my requirements was, if you were coming as a client with some kind of spirit attachment or some need for the outreach ministry, exorcism ministry, anything of that nature, then the only way I would take you on as a pastoral counseling client was if you were going to a conventional therapist as well, so that I could handle the spiritual and they could handle the psychological, because they are always together. As you know, you can't have one without the other. If you're spiritually sick, that's going to have emotional and psychological ramifications. And if you're mentally ill or emotionally ill, that's going to have spiritual ramifications. You know this very well.
Yeah. And that's one of the things is, that's what got me diagnosed with PTSD. And that's my official diagnosis. I know there's been people speculating behind the scenes. And my official diagnosis is PTSD. And I had depression as well. I don't have depression anymore. I worked through a whole lot of that, but I'm going to be dealing with PTSD for the rest of my life. And that's just how it is.
It's
There's always going to be some other trauma coming up.
Yeah, that's the trauma you went through. And I mean, that does not heal overnight, although it does get better. It does. I mean, if you're committed, and certainly if you are committed to the spiritual side, you can move beyond it. But it's like a scar. It's like scar tissue. You'll always kind of feel it there. And if you go poking and prodding, you'll know it's there. And that's something that, that's where resiliency comes in.
Yeah. And of course, I had to figure out also, like, why was I having such a problem with you? And it was because you were reminding me of some other person that traumatized me. You kind of physically resembled him. You'd say some of the same things, but he would take it to some extent.
I mean,
he would take it to some extreme end. And of course, you're not even thinking those sorts of things. But that guy, he was actually trying to set off my autism, because I do have autism as well. I get excited. And so where was I? So he was trying to set off the autism. I get airheaded.
You're fine.
There are people who think I'm some kind of mastermind. I'm like, no, really, I'm an airhead. I'm a real stream of consciousness, and I'm playing things. I'm not, like, right now my plan is move to Vegas, see what happens.
Hey, that's what I did, when I moved out there. Yeah.
So this guy was actually trying to cause me harm, and because you were resembling him and saying some of the same phrases that he was saying, because he was libertarian, but he was doing some crazy stuff.
See, there's only 16 personalities, Joy. There's only 16 people in the world. So, you're bound to run into the same person a lot.
Yeah. And basically, I described him as if you were a Leo, you would have been that guy. Thank God you're a Cancer.
Yeah, the Cancer keeps me a little bit more grounded, I think.
Yeah. So, once I realized that, I was able to work through that and start separating those images, but it took me time. I had to realize that, I had to get to that point. And, every time I had a trauma that was being activated, I needed to figure out where it came from, why it was being triggered, what's going on. And it had to go step by step, working through everything. And I remember when we started the pastoral counseling, I had no idea what I was going to be doing, and I couldn't figure out how to connect with the visualizations that I was doing. And it was it St. Ignatius? Was it Ignatian exercises?
Oh yeah. We gave you all the spiritual direction and yeah.
So, but I just I couldn't connect to God. I couldn't connect to Jesus. Like, I kept feeling separate.
Yeah.
Until I started working through some of those issues and started getting my head in a better spot. I couldn't connect spiritually. So anything that I perceived spiritually wasn't necessarily, anything outside of me. It could have been something that I created, or it could be just me thinking something's happening. So I had to be very careful not to do any kind of, people don't know this, people a lot of times don't know this about me, magical workings. I do magic stuff. Not like magic tricks. I do craft. I make candles, and I do things at the new moon that are generally reflective and looking inside myself, honoring my ancestors. I don't see a conflict between that and my Christianity, because they're not actually the same thing. They kind of loosely connect in the metaphysical realm, but they get along. And so I have those elements to me as well. And so any kind of working I might have done during that time period would have been off, because I could not connect to spirit, because I was not right in my mind. Because every time I went out of the house, something else was triggered. Or if I was sitting here by myself and watching TV, something could get triggered. And I'm going, I'm going ballistic inside my head because of all of the traumas I've experienced.
Yeah.
And I remember at some point you saying to me, that we had to find a way to, get me to stop creating more demons.
The demon factory. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the word you might have used.
Yeah, it was.
Yes. You've used it a time or five.
Uh-huh. I sure have.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I came out to see you guys, I also experienced the illness there. And I'm still experiencing it, even though I've had my gallbladder out, because there are, environmental factors that are contributing to it now that weren't in place at the time, but now they are.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that this move, I will get healthier and healthier the more I get out of here. And I'm really looking forward to that, because I'm really hoping to be involved in your demonologist training, because I have had so much experience from being the client and from studying it before then, and from studying metaphysics from you and esoteric mysticism. It has all given me a great insight. And I'm really hoping that I can use that then to help other people who are going through these situations. Because
I think it's important that that it is put to that kind of use, because I don't think that God allows these types of situations to occur without there being lessons that can be extracted from them. Not that they're done for this reason, but I think they're allowed to happen because it does give us opportunity to further enhance our spirituality and our relationship to Him. And these are things that I think you've discovered, that you've talked about, right now, in fact, and you've talked about them. And not so sure that those motivations would have been there if these other things hadn't been going on to sort of direct you into this new place. And I think it's good that you're moving. One of the things that I wish more clients did, that when they do come into a confirmed spirit attachment or demonic attachment of some kind, one of the best things they can do is move out of the house in which this happened, or at least the house where they suffered the most, because the energy becomes contaminated by the entire environment becomes contaminated by the energy that's exuding from the attachment. And as long as you live there, well, guess what? That energy is still there, and that's really hard to remove. Now, a real qualified exorcist could come in and clean that up, but even a real qualified shaman, someone who's legitimate, could go in and figure and be able to figure out what's wrong and clean a lot of that up. But it's usually it's a process. You're wearing away the energy.
It's not a one and done.
It's never one and done. You disassemble it. And see, this is the problem when people are like, well, I've got this spirit in the house. Oh, burn sage, get your house blessed by a priest. These are good things to do. Well, not so much the sage, but the house blessing is a good thing to do. But even that is only the first step on a journey or a process towards healing. And I think you've discovered that how much of a process this actually is. Through this.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I had the therapist, but I also had, pastoral counseling, and I had massage therapy, and sometimes just Reiki done on me. And that was to address, the physical and energetic bodies. But then I also had medical doctors working on me as well.
Yeah, right.
All because of a spirit attachment that you considered relatively minor. And, knowing, because I've seen videos of much worse, I know what I had was mild, and it messed me up that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Mild
doesn't mean not serious. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's true.
These people who are suffering through these things, they're going through some really rough stuff that people don't understand. Because I know how rough it was for me. And every time I got sick, I would have this delirium. Mm. I would have, horrific fever, and I'd be like dreaming weird, crazy things. And it was like going on a spirit quest. So I treated it like a spirit quest and just, dedicated it to my own healing and working through confronting my demons, understanding why the things that are coming at me or making me afraid. What is this that I'm addressing? And, working with my therapist, working with you, it was an ordeal. I had to do a whole lot of thinking, and I'm glad I wasn't working during that time, because I couldn't have worked.
Right. No.
I was not functional enough for that.
Right.
And that's why I say, that I was batshit crazy, because that PTSD was just taking over everything, and I couldn't calm down. My blood pressure was through the roof, and I couldn't stop throwing up.
Yeah.
And I would come out of the fever and not be quite done with the delirium.
Yeah.
So it really tore me up over time. And of course, some of that could have been the black mold, but working through these issues has taught me how to work through these issues. And that's why I'm glad I'm moving to Vegas, because I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping maybe Zach will hire me. I'm just saying.
He has those hiring sprays from time to time, so you never know.
Every now and then, I'm hoping, I'll be there for next time.
There you go.
I still have, when I came out to get the bell exercised,
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of items to bless. One was book 4 of the Liturgy of Hours,
Mm-hmm.
which we're currently in, because
Right.
this was the time of year we did it.
It was, yeah.
The other is these lace gloves. Remember these?
Yes, I do.
I do. Yeah.
I do.
Because I do psychometry, and you were like, well, I don't want you touching, more objects that could be haunted or cursed or something. You need some kind of protection. So I came up with this idea where I could have the web of protection, but also be able to do the psychometry.
Yeah.
And so I've got these things, and it's like,
Have you found them
I
helpful?
want to work at a place. I want to work at a place that's filled with haunted and cursed objects. That would really rock. And just imagine how much that would help in, me seeing stuff like that on a regular basis. How much that would help seeing who's affected, energetically, what's going on.
Well, you're going to see it a lot. If you do end up working there, you would see it a lot, because I can tell you that the few times that I have visited, I have ended up having to bless a whole bunch of people when I'm out of there. And once they figure out who they went through the tour with, a lot of people don't realize it until we're at the end.
We had one lady in our group. She, as soon as the doors to the Dybbuk box room opened, she just immediately burst into tears and was unconsolable.
Yeah.
Her boyfriend had to walk off with her. I think that was the first or second time we were there.
Might have been. Yeah, I think it was the second. Maybe it was the first. It might have been the first.
Might have been.
But do you find, Joy, that the gloves help? Do you find that?
I haven't had an opportunity to use them yet.
Oh, you really? Okay.
Everything I own.
Yeah, that's not going to have the same impact. Now, let me ask about the bell real quickly, because I do recall we threw that thing into a holy fire after we exercised it live. We did that live on, I think it was Periscope at the time.
Yeah.
And it melted a lot faster than I thought it would, being made of brass.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
It's a soft metal, but it did not take long for that thing to just dissolve.
It dissolved. I mean, it sort of almost folded in on itself, which was very interesting.
It did, because I poked it with a stick and it folded in on itself, and it just gave in. The structure just was decimated.
You didn't know we were doing it, and you felt something, did you not?
Mm-hmm.
And then you went and tuned on to my Twitter, and then you saw that it was happening, and then that...
She either texted me or you or somebody, but asked if we were doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt it.
Right. That's pretty significant. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about that bell, before I was born, my parents were doing dark magic stuff, and they used the bell for some weird things. And of course, then later on, it was used to violate me. And then my dad insisted later on that I have it as a gift. I'm not remembering any of this stuff, but I'm going, well, I mean, I've always seen the bell, so, whatever. And I brought it out here. There were red stains inside it. I don't know what those red stains were. I've never asked. I tried to bless it myself. I, tried various things to make it not icky anymore. And none of those things really seemed to work. So once it was burned, I felt the difference.
Yeah. Now, do you find that in addition, or I guess alongside feeling the difference, do you find that it has improved your some of the residual problems that you have had to live with and work with through this healing situation that you've been in for, since it started?
Yeah. Because some of what was released was the stuff that wouldn't let go of me, whether it came out of me or it came from somewhere else because it was used for such weird stuff. I don't know why it was affecting me, but it had so many tendrils connected.
Do you think
because of all the crazy stuff it had done?
I mean, this is speculation and you're not really going to know, but do you think it's possible that he left this to you as a vindictive continuation?
No, it was never about power for him. He genuinely did not understand why doing sexual things with children was wrong. He thought it was very loving. And he probably wanted me to have it because of his sentimental reasons.
Which is sick in of itself, but yeah. So you think he was just a genuine classic pedophile?
Yeah. Because he wanted me to consent. And that was the big deal why nothing ever happened, because I wasn't consenting to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Without it, he wasn't going to do anything because he thought it was very loving to, even when I was in high school, to introduce me to those things. And it's like, no, icky.
Mm-hmm.
Pure speculation, but he was probably a victim himself at some point.
He was molesting other people when he was a child.
Yeah, something happened to him when he was very young. Yeah.
Because you don't do things like that as a kid if you don't have someone introducing you to that.
Every case I worked with pedophilia, the actual offender had been molested too.
Yeah. And I don't know what the story is. Of course, he's been dead for years. So, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't have fought that thing off if I tried.
No. It's sad. It's interesting though. And it is worth mentioning because I think it's something that a lot of people should be aware of, is that one thing that most exorcists will tell you is that it's very, very common, exceptionally common, like dangerously, frighteningly common, that when you dig through the history of an individual that is suffering from very severe demonic oppression or possession, that there was some kind of history of sexual assault usually in their youth that is associated with it, which seems to be an opening point. Perhaps possibly because it's sort of one of the ultimate evils. If we're going to talk about one of the worst things that a human being is capable of doing, that would certainly be up there with one of the worst.
Well, it's the degradation and ripping away of innocence.
And that's what the demonic is really all about, is to destroy creation and destroy the beauty of creation. And by doing that, by bastardizing the very faculty of creation, because human sexuality is one of the most sacred gifts that God gave us, and to bastardize that and pervert it and to turn it into this is the very hallmark of demonic activity when you think about it. So it stands to reason that it would be an entry point. The sad part is that obviously victims of this wouldn't know that it's making them spiritually vulnerable. Now add to that black magic and the other occult things that they were doing, combined with someone like yourself, who's kind of a natural, you're sort of a natural empath. You have sort of natural magical abilities. If I were to guess, I'd say digging into your ancestry, there would be definitely some ancestral witchcraft going on somewhere in your ancestors that you inherited, and that all of that creates like the perfect storm. You're actually lucky, Joy. It only went as bad as it did. You're really lucky that it didn't become full-blown possession and that we caught it in time. assuming, I mean, it would have been nice to have been able to do this years before you met me, but it's still better than what it could have turned into.
Yeah. Because one of the things that it was doing was, it would, of course, the spirit would affect me in sexual ways, but it would also drag my consciousness out of my body. Because one of the things I learned to do, like, I was actually at a therapist's office when I learned this. Somebody led me through a visualization exercise and I misunderstood and I left my body. So I learned how to project my consciousness to other places. And so this spirit really didn't have any problem displacing me somehow. Mm. So that kept happening. But after I came to see you, it stopped. And I just want to say, one of the things about sexual abuse is people a lot of times will just say, oh, just forgive them and you won't be in any danger of anything like this happening. And it's like, no, that trauma stays in your body. You have to work through, you have to think about it, you have to heal, you have to confront those issues. Yeah. You cannot simply forgive the person and move on because it's still inside you. And you have to get that out. That's the demon itself. And that's how it was given to you through that sexual abuse. Yeah. So it's something that you have to work through with somebody who knows how to work through those things. And of course, a lot of people will say, oh, well, I don't want to take medication. Well, then don't go to a psychiatrist. Go to a psychologist, a licensed psychologist. Only some of them in some states can prescribe anything. Most of them cannot. Yeah. But they can help you psychoanalyze and help you look at yourself and see where your traumas are and what it is and how it needs to heal. And they can help talk you through that. So like when I move, I'm definitely getting a licensed psychotherapist, a licensed psychologist who knows how to dive into trauma because I have to heal like everything.
You do. And if you don't continue to work on that, then you make yourself vulnerable for some of these things to reoccur. And that's the last thing you want, is a reoccurrence of something as serious as that has been. We're talking with Joy Keeling about spirit attachment, particularly her own experiences with spirit attachment. We're at the top of the hour, getting ready to end segment 1 here. We'll be back in just a moment for segment 2 and taking your questions for Joy. Or even if you have a comment or something that you'd like to discuss with us on the show tonight, don't go away.
tracking you down.
One look, the heat is rising, and I've been cold for so long. One touch and we're igniting, setting fire to it all. You know these flames ain't going out. This building is crumbling to the ground. Don't think that we can stop it now, 'cause baby our love is gonna burn down. You know these days ain't going out. This building is crumbling to the ground. Don't think I won't.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark as we begin the second segment here to take your questions, your calls. We're here for you, and I'm sure you have many questions about tonight's topic, maybe even for tonight's guest. We'd love to hear from you. It's much better if you call into the show. The number to call is 347-338-1860. That's 347-338-1860. Enter number PIN 1100999. That's PIN number 1100999. That will get you connected to the switchboard. We'll also be taking your questions from the various chat rooms across social media. Don't go away. Part 2 in just a moment. I saw only one question, but I know there was a whole bunch coming in the chat on YouTube while I was at break. But I noticed one from, I think it was Matthew, asking about the whether or not we're taking clients or taking requests for help. Right now, the outreach ministry is indefinitely suspended while we restructure the program from the bottom up. This is going to take quite some time, probably several more months before we're ready to even begin taking clients again. The good news is when we get out of this restructuring, we will probably have a location once again for people to come to rather than having to, give advice over the phone or at worst, spend $4,000 or $5,000 to come to another state to see what we can do to help them inside their home. That there'll be a place where they can come to and perhaps get the kind of help that they require. So that's part of this restructuring. Another part of it, which is a very important part, is getting some legal enhancements to protect the ministry as well as everybody involved. Because, it's getting a little bit crazy. This world's getting a little bit crazy right now. People are not coming to us necessarily with the best of intentions. And we need to have every legal I dotted and every legal T crossed before we can really safely engage in this ministry again. That's part of the drawback of growth. These are the growing pains that come with now, international exposure because of the television shows, and even doing a show like this, this is also internationally growing, and that the exposure, while it's a good thing, also has the negative drawback of meaning that you get people that do not have your best intentions in mind coming to you, and they're not really looking for help. They're looking for a way to destroy you. I'm not going to let that happen. We're going to have some of the best lawyers on our side very soon to protect us against defamation, libel, as well as anything else that could come up in this ministry. And so that's part of why we're no longer taking cases, at least right now. So yes, there are no cases. It's why there's no intake form on the website anymore. It's why the website, when you go there, says that this ministry is suspended for the time being. We're restructuring it entirely, and then when we also get out, we'll also be having a demonology program opening up in the various cities across the world, where you can go locally to get some help for the majority of the kinds of things that you might run into out there. Again, you don't really need an exorcist for 99% of the things that we end up resolving in this ministry. It's only for that very small percentage where I would actually have to get involved. So that's what's going on. If you've been wondering, and it was a good question, Matthew, I think, I appreciate that. But anyway, let's get back to tonight's topic with Joy Keeling. We have Father Chris from Australia joining us as well. Did any of you see any questions for either Joy or the topic tonight that was worth bringing up?
I have one from Laura back at 8:34, and Joy answered it for her specific case. It was a yes. Do you create these attachments from your own trauma? Our experience, quite often, yes.
Yeah, it's what the tulpa ultimately is in this case, or a thought form. It can also be, if you're really good at it, and Joy's really good at it, you could create an egregore. If you're not careful. And that's when it can affect all sorts of people, not just you. Usually thought forms and tulpas are really only products of your own reality, but egregores can actually extend into the phenomenal world and affect other people, which can be also very dangerous. Although not to say that thought forms can't either. It's usually more subtle. Now, the more important thing to keep in mind about this, and one of the things I think people don't understand, is that trauma in itself is by its very nature a demonic activity. So all demonic activity is sentient to a degree. And so as we engage in trauma, as we suffer from trauma, as we inflict trauma on others, which is kind of the par for the course with the human race, you are participating in demonic activity, which in itself creates energy that is intelligent, is sentient, and can affect harm on other people. And that's what happens. So sometimes, and I've said this before, sometimes I'll be, performing an exorcism. And during the solemn rite of exorcism, there is a part of the rite that requires the exorcist to demand, under the name of Jesus Christ, to reveal itself. And, you would expect to get some kind of like ancient name from a grimoire somewhere in the Middle Ages. And sometimes and oftentimes you do. But more often than not, we'll get a name like pedophilia or lust or murder. The demon will call itself what it does. These are demonic entities, usually manifestations of people's trauma. Okay, so yes, trauma does indeed create the demonic thought form. This is why we have 4 classifications of demons in my system that I teach. When we get into demonology, if you want to become a demonologist for this church, when we're ready to open up the program, you're going to learn a lot about those 4 classes of demons. And the first one is the only true demon. First class is the fallen angel.
Fallen angels.
Yeah, fallen angel. That's a genuine demon in the Judeo-Christian sense. But there's 3 other categories that are demonic in the sense that they're malevolent spiritual activities, but not really satanic. Okay, so the only one that's truly satanic is the first category. The second is with when you're dealing with I should qualify this. Demonic activity, okay, is more pervasive than satanic. So while things might be demonic, they're not necessarily satanic. All satanic things are demonic, but not all demonic things are satanic. Okay. So understand that. So the first category is that satanic category, the fallen angels. The second is elementals. And elementals are typically for our purposes, they're the malevolent types of spirits that are not fallen angels, other types of incorporeal beings that exist in the universe that can harm us, but not for the same reasons usually. And they can range in sentience, from the sentience that would be compatible with a mosquito all the way up to something that is comparable to a human being. The example of that would be the jinn. They're extremely intelligent, very capable, very difficult to work with. You never want to have to deal with one. But there's other kinds of spirits that are more like, kind of incorporeal mosquitoes that are a nuisance more than anything else, but they can make you very sick. Just like, you get bit by enough mosquitoes, you could get sick. You could get Lyme disease or some kind of mosquito-borne illness. So that doesn't mean it's safe just because it's only a mosquito. Third category are the egregores. They're what we call created demons, and this comes out of usually trauma or occult practice. Remember, you were made in the image of God. That doesn't mean that God looks like you do. Okay, that doesn't mean that God has two eyes, a nose, two ears, and a mouth, and walks around on two legs. Okay, that's not what that means. Meaning, being made in the image of God means we are made in the likeness of His nature, which is to be creators ourselves. Which means, by our very nature, we can manifest things. We have that power naturally, and this is where that comes from. And the fourth category is the wrathful spirits, which are the spirits of the dead who have not moved on, who are attached to life in some form or fashion, or suffered a traumatic death and weren't ready to move on, and through the process of spiritual degradation slowly degrade into what would be a demonic entity. And for the living, all intents and purposes, they are demons, and they affect them the same way, and they have to be dealt with in much the same way. So those are the four categories, and what we're talking about tonight and what Joy's been dealing with has been mostly from the third, but not entirely. She has dealt with elementals, and and don't think that just because it's only an elemental or a created demon that it's, a piece of cake. Actually, the created are some of the worst and most difficult to get rid of because they follow their own rules. The first class, satanic demons, fallen angels, actually have a protocol they follow that makes it a lot easier to work with them, believe it or not. It's these ones that are created from trauma that can be very hard, and you got to get to the source of that issue, usually through years of psychotherapy, as we've already talked about. So that's what we're dealing with all the time, and this is part of the work that we deal with. This is true demonology, folks, okay? Demonology is not, reading ancient grimoires and trying to figure out what kind of demon we're conjuring tonight. It's really about dealing with the reality of the fallen world and having to navigate the fallen world as creatures of creation who have fallen from the grace that we once possessed and have to return to through the process of salvation that Jesus Christ provides. Now that's the Judeo-Christian story, and that's the one that we subscribe to here. So hopefully that.
Yeah, I was going to say that, on that subject, one of my reflections from listening to Joy and you speak in the first hour is that you did a very good job of showing that sacramentals, that prayer, that working through these things are not magic in the sense of, you come in and wave a wand and these things just disappear.
Yeah, no Gandalf solutions, no Dumbledore solutions,
Exactly. Yeah, and so I think that's a really good message and witness, and actually shows in the divine plan why God allows these things, because it shows that it's that deep faith development that we're all called to engage in. We spoke last week about, sort of lazy atheists who it's just too much hard work, and so it's easy to say, oh, there's no God, and so that's the end of it, because
they're always mad about it. They're mad that God doesn't exist.
Oh, that's true.
They're mad God's not existing.
They're mad because they got to work for it. They got to work for their understanding.
Yeah. Well, they're mad because they know he really does.
Yeah.
I think they're
How
mad.
dare you not exist in the way I want you to when I want you?
Yeah.
Yes, Joy, you just hit the
down
nail on the
inside.
head.
You've
You just
nailed
it.
you hit the nail on the head. That's what it is. They're mad that it's not the way they want it to be, and they're upset with us because we accept that and they can't. And I think that's really ultimately what that's all about. But yes, I mean, this is another type of faith experience. It's not one that you necessarily want to go on, but there's multiple ways that the dark night of the soul can manifest, and spirit attachment is one of them. Joy, I know you're in the chat room on YouTube. Did you see any questions for you that you would like to answer?
Yeah, I did. Because Kiki asked a great question. Is it safe enough for Joy to keep submerging herself into the paranormal, like wanting to work in a haunted museum? Isn't she likely to get new attachments? And now that I've learned like how to fight them off, and the ones you create yourself are the hardest. And I think the way you explained it, Bishop, was it was my energy, and now it's out here and it's rotting and it's trying to reattach. And so it doesn't really understand. And whatever I've put into it, that's what comes back at me. Mm-hmm. That's what attaches. But if I can work through that, then it's not going to affect me. And so the new attachments, I've been in places that were considered haunted. I've had people, call me in on cases where they think there's some kind of demon or some kind of malevolent spirit. That's been going on since the 90s. I actually stumbled on, someone who had an attachment, and I was having to deal with that. And it just went from there. So what knocked me out about this was because it was a wrathful spirit, and it was someone who was so intricately connected to me. I mean, I had half of this person's DNA. So naturally I have half of their energy. So when they weren't ready to let go, they latched on. Once I got that removed, then I had the other things I had to work with and had to heal, had to learn how to work through those issues on the fly even. Yeah. And so now that I know how to fight off my own demons, which are the hardest to fight off because they're made out of your own energy. They're made out of the change in pattern from the trauma that's been introduced, that energy of the trauma, because trauma has its own kind of energy. I'm sure you've sensed it when when you walked into the room with Dr. Kevorkian's van.
Yes.
That was weird, dude. Yeah.
In that room.
You could feel it there.
A trauma happened in that van. Even though it was considered peaceful by the people who were experiencing it, it's still a trauma. And it still produces that radiation, and it immersed the van in that radiation, and that carries it with it.
Well, I have a problem with people calling that even like assisted suicide, because I tend to think of suicide as people who want to die. I don't think any of those people wanted to die. They were choosing a way to alleviate. They wanted the pain to stop, which is trauma in itself. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yes, and I did feel it in that room, and that was, I think, in many ways one of the most. There were two rooms in the haunted mansion that I don't like, and the Kevorkian room, only because the energy level is too high and it's disorienting, but the worst room is that serial killer room. With the bed sheets, and I don't like that room. And I mean that to me, that makes the Dybbuk room and the Demon House room feel like a cakewalk. But that serial killer room where there is the fluid, the bodily remains of people who are tortured and murdered on those very bed sheets, just hanging there. And all, it's still from the crime scene, so it was never cleaned, and it was kept. There's feces on there from these victims.
It's a similar thing. I went to the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, on a seminar, and it leaves an imprint.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. I mean, conversely though, to give some positivity. I'm from a country that has very ancient churches, and likewise they leave a positive imprint. There's a sort of, you can't manufacture a prayed in place.
Remember, everyone, Father Chris lives in Australia, but he was actually from the UK, so that's what he's talking about.
Yes, that's true. So I think a lot of people, even agnostic type people, experience that kind of prayerful space that somewhere that's been prayed in for a long period of time, sometimes 1,500 years. It leaves that positive impression, so it's not so hard to comprehend that the negative also leaves an impression.
It does. And see, and to get back also to the question, it was Kiki that had this question. Yeah. I would say, Joy, you're correct. You're in a position, I think, spiritually, where almost anywhere you go, you would be at risk if you are going to let yourself become vulnerable enough to be at risk again. So going to the haunted museum might actually have the opposite effect, almost like an immune system reaction, in the sense that maybe what you need is to be exposed even more to the intensities here, so that your spiritual immune system builds up and becomes even more resilient to it while you're already strengthening. Now, I would say the only caveat to this is to be extra mindful. You shouldn't go to work if you're feeling spiritually vulnerable, or if there are things going on where you're not at your optimal best, because you are always going to be at greater risk for a reoccurrence now that you've gone through this.
But I also know how to fight it.
Yeah.
So, and most of the things that I encounter, even if it's not something that came out of me, it's going to affect me in much a similar way, usually, because it's going to be affecting me somewhere where I'm weak, somewhere that I haven't healed yet. Because if I, have that strength with me, then that's not going to be a vulnerability where it can attach.
And, getting back, getting to the sacraments and keeping yourself up to date on those sacraments, and you should know by now, confession at least twice a year, preferably Lent and Advent are great times to go to confession. But more, honestly, I'm one of those people that's like, use it. It's there. And, go, as often as you feel like you need to, but at least minimally twice a year. And, Eucharist, at least minimally once a week. But, there's also in Las Vegas, there's a great Eastern Catholic Church that you might want to explore if you want to try some of the older Eastern experience. So there's I think it's I want to say it's Ruthenian. It's Ruthenian. Yeah.
And of course, I want to do this demonologist thing. So I have my liturgy of the hours. I've got a 3-bedroom house. The third bedroom is going to be a chapel.
Oh, great.
And so I'm hoping you can make it to Vegas and bless the chapel. Father Chris, if you make it before he does, you can do it.
He's okay traveling, so he might get there before I do. But
well, I can't travel till November. I am now legally allowed to get a haircut, which is good news. But
I saw that, yeah.
I had to queue for about half an hour because, of course, every bloke in Australia was trying to get a haircut on Monday. But no, I can travel from November, and so I'm hoping to do a US tour.
Well, there you go. If you stop in Vegas, go ahead and give a blessing to Joy.
Yeah, because I'm going to have a whole chapel full of stuff. I've got stations, I've got prayer books, I've got a kneeler, I've got statues, all kinds of things to be blessed. And I want that to be a regular thing, doing liturgy of the hours each day, doing the divine office.
Yeah.
It is amazed. It is amazed as you. I know we've had some messages through the church's app, about the challenges of praying the liturgy of the hours.
Right. Joy's been one of the instruments of that one.
I'm pretty good daily doing it, but I'll confess this morning I didn't get it done. And usually that's the first thing I do is matins and lauds. Yeah. But
it's not just, fell through. It's not just the spiritual battle of disciplining oneself to actually set the space, but it's actually technically very difficult to to go from never done it before to being given this book with about 8 different ribbons in it. And
it took me a long time to get it down.
Joy, how is it coming for you? Are you finding that it's getting easier? Or are you still struggling with some of it?
Yeah, it's getting easier once I slowed down and looked at the table of contents and just examined what each section was about and broke it down and it made sense after a while, because of course I have a background using the Book of Common Prayer, which also has, all of the, all kinds of prayers and, the invitatory prayer at the very beginning. And like I prayed, on a daily basis, the Book of Common Prayer, doing the daily office that way.
Yeah.
So it's just a little more complicated. But once I broke it down, once I looked at, the different sections, and of course there's an entire section that tells you this is how it's done.
Right.
So
it's quite a long section.
It is. That's why you got to small bites.
I mean, the Book of Common Prayer, because you come from an Episcopalian background, the Book of Common Prayer basically join the offices together into matins and evensong. So matins is kind of the mixture of lauds and matins, and evensong is vespers and terce kind of thrown into one. So there's nothing wrong with the offices from the Book of Common Prayer, but it's just that the variety isn't there.
No, they don't have the same level of depth, I think, in that respect. Yeah. And even the one that we have, even that 4-volume set, as big as it is, was supposed to be a lot larger. They originally, it's just been
reissued, hasn't it? I think they've just done the new translation of it.
Have they? I have not.
I think they might. I'm not 100%. I mean, I pray the very old-fashioned one.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go.
And for sure, the reason why the Book of Common Prayer is so, 1 volume and this is 4 is because this spells out a lot more stuff, whereas the Book of Common Prayer gives you a book and verse to look up. So you have to have separate books to make it work.
Well,
it was trying to do a lot of things, the BCP. I mean, it was the we don't need to get into English Reformation history, but the thing that a lot of Anglicans, especially more evangelical Anglicans, misunderstand about the Book of Common Prayer is that it presupposed a lot of knowledge that priests and bishops already had. And so it didn't have all the comprehensive sort of rubrics that we now see in the modern Roman rites. And so over time, of course, that knowledge was lost or displaced.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of ended up a bit of a remnant of something that was much bigger.
Well, see, like I said, even the 4 volumes that we find that a lot of people find very complicated was supposed to be a lot larger, just as the Mass follows a lectionary cycle, a 3 lectionary cycle for the Sundays and a 2 lectionary cycle for the weekdays. The Office of Readings was supposed to also have those same cycles. And because I guess I could be wrong, but I think many years ago, I remember reading that they ran out of the budget ran out and they just cut it short at 1 cycle. So there was going to be at one point 3 times more reading. So can you imagine? That would have been probably 6-volume set if it had been completed.
I once met, actually in the same place that I last week I said I'd held St. Thomas More's drinking tankard. It was in the same location. There was a small monastery that had actually been re-established. Mm-hmm. I mean, with a sort of 500-600 year gap because of the Reformation.
Right.
And one of the sisters there, beloved Dame Therese, she was I don't know what age she was when I met her. She's gone to her reward now, but she was one of the translators of of the breviary. So yeah, I met her, and that was a real privilege.
Yeah, I'm sure.
She was a beautiful, gentle soul.
I'm sure.
Beautiful soul.
Yeah. Sister Murray Joan, do we have other questions?
Yeah, we got quite a few. We got one from Terry.
Okay.
Go back and find it.
So anyway, I think the daily prayer will help.
Oh yeah, it will. Honestly, well, prayer never hurts, but I mean, if you are dedicated to your prayer life, then spirit attachment is going to be a lot a lot less of a risk. I mean, there's no question about that. Most people suffer from spirit attachments because their prayer life is just so non-existent.
So this question from Terry is pretty easy to answer. It's just flat out says, "Hi Bishop, how would you deal with child abuse?"
How would I deal with child abuse? What's that?
Right.
That's the question? How would
you deal with child abuse? I'm not quite sure. It's from Terry. I'm not quite sure.
Well, I can tell you what I do with child abusers.
Yeah, me too. But,
they might not get back up when I'm done with them, but
right. Maybe you could explain both the victim as well. How would you handle that if someone came to you, a confession or something?
Well, yeah, and again, it depends on the kind of situation. There's very many different types of abuse too. You know, you obviously we focus on the sexual, but there's the physical, of which sexuality is one part, and then there's emotional abuse, which is perhaps the most prolific, and that's the most prolific one, and that's the one that just gets swept under the carpet. Very hard to prove, very hard to do anything with. Sometimes the victim doesn't even realize they're the victim of it because it becomes so second nature that they're around it all the time. There's lots of different types of abuse, and depending upon what the person's dealing with, really determines the course of action. But I'm a strong advocate for psychotherapy. And so I would say that in addition to maintaining your prayer life and your spiritual life, if you've suffered a trauma of some kind as a child, and now you're dealing with it as an adult, then you need to go get help and not be afraid to do that. You know, there's no harm or shame in going to get help or acknowledging that you need help, because that's what it's there for. And there are some excellent psychotherapists in the world who know how to deal with this kind of thing. I would stay away from psychiatry as much as you possibly can, because they typically only want to medicate you. And sometimes that can be helpful. Sometimes that's what you need. But a lot of times that's not going to heal you, okay? The medication just kind of dulls your sensitivities to the things that you're experiencing, because most people don't suffer from child abuse. Most people suffer from anxiety disorders, depression, suicidal ideation, post-traumatic stress disorder, as Joy has pointed out. Sometimes personality disorders develop, and they can be very hard to treat, almost impossible, if not impossible, to cure. So, there's a lot of factors here. But you don't typically suffer from child abuse. You suffer some kind of reaction that causes a major mental illness, and that needs to be treated. And don't be afraid to go get that treated. And, if medication's required, then by all means, see what might work for you, but never at the expense of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is the best way to go.
I would just add to that, I mean, one of the limitations of the church is that, not all clergy are
qualified,
psychologically trained.
Yeah.
And so now that doesn't mean that they can't help. It's just, there is a difference between spiritual, prayerful, catechesis, nurturing, and psychotherapy. There is a difference between those two things. And in fact, even if a clergyman is trained in both, they wouldn't do both at the same time. Because they're different. They're different things.
Yeah, you got to stay in your lane.
We saw that with Amanda earlier in the season.
Ruth Morris.
Yeah, Amanda Morris talked about how she keeps the two worlds apart, and she has to professionally. It's her professional obligation to do so, and priesthood would be no different. But that's a good.
And another way an ultimate way of dealing with all kind of human problems it was another question that Terry raised. I think it's the same Terry. I'm not sure.
It is.
Which is, hi Joy, how do you learn to forgive someone? And I think we kind of touched on forgiveness before, and I've got some reflections on it. But Terry asked you. So what do you think, Joy?
Question?
How do you deal with forgiveness? And I mean, I guess that's to add to that. Have you forgiven your father for what he's done?
I mean,
it's a tough question.
It is.
Yeah,
that's a hard one to ask.
It really is. It's short, but it's tough.
I spent my childhood in therapy because of what had happened. And then at some point, he was getting married to someone else so that he could, have me back in his life and it would be considered safe. So I had to forgive him. So I forgave him for what I thought, had happened, but there was so much more that I didn't remember. And then, of course, there were things he said to me that were just so traumatizing when I was older. But when I was about 13, I forgave him, and I, then got to know him as a person. But then he would still just, things would fly out of his mouth, or he'd say that he wanted certain things, and I'd just be looking at him like he'd grown a third head, like a third head.
Yeah.
Like two, one on each shoulder, just like, what?
He was disturbed. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I think one of the really damaging axioms, truisms, which is not true, it's an untruism, is this absurd notion of forgive and forget.
Yeah.
That's not forgiveness.
Never forget.
That's amnesia. It's just it's so reductionary. I mean, yes, we can forgive and forget trifling matters. If I spilled your coffee, then forgive and forget. But actually, it's so damaging, because actually forgiveness is so much more significant and powerful than that. That if somehow something can just be forgotten, it didn't really matter. Things that really matter, that's what forgiveness is for. And an explanation of forgiveness that's chimed with me is it's voluntarily giving up your right to vengeance. It's releasing yourself from the desire to have vengeance, which is actually a righteous vengeance if someone has truly harmed you. But of course, as Christians, we would say vengeance is the Lord's. But forgive and forget is really damaging. Actually, when someone is able to reach the point of forgiveness, it's because of a profound shift that's allowed that energy that's so dominant of indignity, indignation, all of that. And actually it's why it's divine. It's why forgiveness is divine, because only by a divine act can people reach that point. I think it's why I understand when people say that's unforgivable. I understand why people say that. Well, of course,
Well, and one of the things that occurred to me is, anger is. People think that anger is evil, and it's like, no. If you're angry because someone did something legit to you, that's perfectly acceptable.
Natural reaction.
It's natural. Yeah. It's how you express it, that's a different thing. But, being angry because someone hurt you like that is absolutely legit. It's just a natural reaction, even, because when that trauma happens, that changes your energy. That bends some kind of energy in on itself in you. And that's going to keep spiraling out of control if you don't pull that out and hammer it out like a car. Like if you have a dent in a car, it's just going to keep having that dent unless you hammer it out and fix it. And you can't do that if you don't acknowledge that it's there. And you can't do that, if you don't have all the facts. You don't even know what you're forgiving. Like in my situation, I didn't remember all the things I needed to forgive him for until I was in my 40s. Like, okay, I had no idea that all of this had happened, but it did. And now I have to figure out, how do I forgive someone who's not even alive?
Well, and that's the key. I mean, Kiki just mentioned in the comments that she thinks it's if someone says sorry and you really know they mean it, that it's the first step to be able to cope with it. Now, I agree that is that's something that helps the process of forgiveness. But of course, you don't always get that. I mean, and that's why the Christian gospel is beyond that, to say, actually, you can find a way to forgive people who aren't sorry, because the unforgiveness is what's eating you up. And it's like, people talk about getting in your head. That's what that is. Someone has not only committed a sin against you and one that generates all of those feelings in you, but then they go and die on you, or say, I don't care, or go to hell. And then you end up a prisoner again because you can't release from that. And I think, the Christian gospel says, actually, and this is why it's hard, it's why people don't want to do it, you have to get to the point where that prayer that our Savior taught us, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us, that has to become true. And that's where the rubber hits the road, and it's very difficult. And so at the same time, I have absolute compassion for people who find that or think it's impossible. I get that's a legitimate conclusion to come to, but actually the miracle of God, the miracle of the incarnation and of the faith that we hold is that actually even in the worst circumstances we can forgive people, and we can forgive people who don't want to be forgiven. We can, if they want to be forgiven by God, though, they have to be sorry.
Yeah, there has to be true
repentance.
repentance.
The thing with him is he didn't understand why he needed to be sorry.
Do you think there's some, do you give personally, not talking theologically, but do you personally give some leeway to your feelings on this situation out of maybe a reduced capacity of culpability on the basis that this man was sick and this was a symptom of his illness? Not that it's an excuse for his behavior, but it's not exactly as though this was volitional intent. At least it doesn't sound like it to me.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to cause me harm. He didn't understand how it was harmful.
Yeah.
Even though I explained it in several different ways, using several different examples, not just me, but other people who had been through things, and trying to get him to understand, and he just couldn't wrap his head around it. And there's nothing that you can do when someone is in that kind of mindset. It's like like the serial killers. There's nothing that could have stopped them. If they're killing like animals to begin with as children, and then they grow up and kill people, for them, it's just a logical thing to do. And for everyone else, we're horrified.
Yeah.
There was nothing that could have changed who he was or changed how he thought about things. So the only thing I could do was try to find some way to forgive him, because he's not going to ever, even, especially now in death, he doesn't have cognition.
Well, actually, you don't need to necessarily convey forgiveness to the person that's wronged you. Like the forgiveness comes before that. You have to have already forgiven them. And then you might think, well, is there any value in me meeting with that person or discussing it with them? Because if they don't give a damn, and if they don't give a damn, it's very unlikely to be helpful, for you. So they're on their own journey, and they've got to find, at some point the Holy Spirit hopefully will be able to get through and convict them of their wrongdoing. And the only purpose of that in the divine plan is so that we can be made right, to be saved. But yeah, I think a lot of damage is done by well-meaning attempts at restorative justice. I've just said a phrase that will probably make Sister Mary Joan want to smash the screen in. Restorative justice, because it does me. I think a lot of damage can be done in the name of restorative justice. Because in a sense, and I hate to use this term, but actually this is the correct use of the term. It ends up in a position of victim blaming. That somebody somehow has to forgive somebody who's a criminal and he doesn't give a damn what they've done to them. It's so damaging to put people in that position. I think, in its true sense, and I don't want to be a caricature, the origin of restorative justice is a sound one, but it has to be one where it's voluntary, not enforced.
Yeah, it seems like it's trying to just eliminate all negativity at all costs without having to work through anything.
Which belittles it. It makes it, we can just go through this process and everything will be fine. You won't need to be bothered by this anymore. What a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
We all have scars, and they're called scars for a reason. We have physical ones or spiritual ones, and so to make it so trite, it's like a Jack and Jill story, it's that's not real life. That's not real life. And so
it's like the people who don't want people
profound.
to grief.
Yeah.
Like you have to go through that process. You have to experience the grief, or it will never start healing.
I remember lots of the little old ladies at my churches. I do their funeral plans, because I'm big on that. In fact, everyone should have a funeral plan. Don't care what age you are. And they used to say, well, I don't want anyone to cry at the funeral. And they used to say, well, that's got bugger all to do with you.
Yeah, right. It's like,
that's not within your gift.
Sister Mary Joan, what's our next question?
Laura had one. She asked, what about many spirits that haunt together? I've heard some spirits say we are 5. Well, 5's kind of a low number. Usually they're in pretty good groups.
We are legion.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there are, we've talked about in one of the areas of demonology, again, this gets into some of the metaphysical aspects of the subject matter that most people are not terribly familiar with. But yes, like legion and then even spirits that haunt, I can compare it to, for the purposes of simplicity, a fracture. In fact, I would say that what fallen nature is a fracture of grace. God is wholeness, all right? The beatific vision is wholeness. The Holy Spirit binds together. The very word religion means to bind, to bring us together. So everything that is good, everything that is of God is whole, is a state of wholeness. It's a state of perfection. It's not divided in any conceivable way. If it weren't, it could not be perfect. It's only perfect if it is absolutely united. What makes the fallen nature the fallen nature is the fact that it fractures from that. And it's not just one fracture. It's kind of like, taking a piece of glass, becomes a very useful windshield, a window, whatever. But as soon as you drop it, it shatters and it becomes, more pieces than you can possibly count. And then,
But
2 or 3
from the same piece of glass.
And it's still from the same piece of glass. And 2 years later, you're walking around and you step on and you cut yourself and you're like, where the hell did this come from? It's because you could never find all the pieces. The demonic is like this. Okay. So this is when you look at we've heard about the 9 choirs of angels, but less talked about is the 9 orders of demons.
Oh, yeah.
And these orders all operate under a universal name. One is Satan, so we know that one. That's one order of demon. Okay. And so oftentimes, you might be in an exorcism situation where one of the demons identifies itself as, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ, tell me your name. They'll say Satan. And then, you exorcise, you dissolve this, you basically eradicate this demon. Okay. If you're doing it right, you're eradicating. They'll use the metaphor of sending them back to hell, but that's not really what you do. I mean, in fact, if you really want to argue, the fires of Gehenna is an annihilation factory. So maybe there's some truth to saying that.
Yeah, they never left hell.
They never left. Right, exactly. So, next day you're doing another exorcism. I command you in the name of Jesus. What's your name? And it says Satan. Did the same one come back? Now, did it jump from this person to that person? No. They're all fractures from that one fallen spirit. You see, one fallen angel, multiple fractures. Okay, so
we call them diabolical, don't we? And that means divided.
Yeah, exactly. The
name
semantics.
Devil, it means division.
Absolutely right. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's very relevant. And so, what you're dealing with, with multiple spirits, is you're dealing with multiple fractures. And the reason that sometimes you have something where we are a legion is because sometimes these clump together, literally, like little chunks that are a little more cohesive than other chunks, and those are worse chunks because now you're dealing with something that's a little bit more coherent. The more fractured it is, usually the easier it is to work through. So that's what this is. That's what causes this metaphysically. And as far as dealing with them, well, you deal with them just like any other. So one of our most serious exorcisms, we had 10 demons to get out of a person. It all referred to itself as Lucifer. Each one of those demons coming out called itself Lucifer. But it was just one of the fractures of that one spirit and, that one angel. And, we went through them and expelled each one at a time. And it took hours and hours to do.
Don't you always think it's the saddest? It's the saddest name in the terms of pathos. The saddest name for the devil is Lucifer.
Yeah.
That he was the light bringer.
The light bringer.
So sad.
And because he betrays his purpose. Yeah, betrays his purpose. Yeah.
And one of the things I want to point out about spiritual entities, they don't have physical forms. So they're not confined to one physical spot.
Correct.
They can be in multiple places at once. Like one elemental that I encountered years and years and years ago was a wind dragon. And he only really lived in this one spot, and it was the entrance to this valley, and it kind of created a wind tunnel. And that's, you know, he only stayed there, but he would come visit me because he remembered me. Mm-hmm. So he could be in that spot and then in front of me saying hello at the same time, because spiritual entities can do that. And then there was another time, this is something I'll go ahead and admit it. I created an entity. I named it Mr. Bimble, and it was actually 5 energetic beings.
Mr. Bimble, huh?
Mr. Bimble.
It was basically
that sounds very, very nefarious.
It was like 5 gnomes in a trench coat. It was like 5 entities that could combine and be one being and work as one, or they could split out and be 5.
Uh-huh.
Right out of Harry Potter, Mr. Bimble.
Yeah,
Mr. Bimble.
And it's just because energetic beings are just energetic beings. They can, you know, energy can divide and be in separate spots and still be the same energy and still be connected to each other.
Absolutely true. We are again talking with Joy Keeling about the nature of spirit attachment and her insights that she has firsthand. I'm taking your questions as well from the chat room. Call into the show, 347-338-1860, pin number 110-0999. We'll come back here for a third hour in just a moment. Don't go away.
There is no there, it is cold there, but I am safe and I am warm. Although it's hard, I know I gotta keep up, no time to lay, to drift away. I find my space, I spend my time down the rabbit hole again, and as I fall I can feel the pain. You can't tell me where to go, so I don't know, I just go with the flow. I go with the flow. I'm falling up, I'm falling down, from the sky and from the ground. Up above just like below, and I don't know where I should go. I'm stuck in limbo. I'm out of love, but I guess I deserved it. Trying to hide, to pass you by. I'm getting down, feeling fine. I'm light as air, no one can reach me. Lost in a dream, lost in between. Let's keep on flying, let's keep on breathing. I'm falling up, I'm falling down, from the sky and from the ground. Up above just like below, and I don't know where I should go. I'm stuck in limbo. Cause I'm stuck in limbo. Cause I'm stuck in limbo.
the calm before the storm. Things aren't as they were before. You best start bracing. Did you think you could keep us out? Shut the gates, forget us now. Tides are changing. Can you hear the sound? Can't stop us now. We're not back in town, know what we're doing. Things are about to change, it's evolution. Once you shake the ground, you feel it moving. We're the revolution. Can you hear the sound?
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final part of Vestiges After Dark tonight. We are taking your questions, and I see that there are some people on call in the switchboard, so don't hang up. We'll get to you when we come back here in just a moment. Don't go away.
With the ground beneath your feet, with a whisper in the trees. Do you feel us watching? Can you hear the sound? Can't stop us now. We're not back in town, know what we're doing. Things are about to change, it's evolution. Once you shake the ground, you feel it moving. We're the revolution. Can you hear the sound? hit the ground, you feel it moving with the revolution.
Calling in from the 702 area code in Las Vegas. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, hold on. I have a testing, so I'm going to try and get rid of the echo.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Okay, is this better?
That's much better. Yes.
Okay, good. So I've called in before, and we've kind of, I haven't been tuning into the program for the last couple of weeks for personal reasons. But when I've called in before, we've kind of established that we think that I have an attachment. I'm the person in the family with the attachment.
Yes.
But my question tonight is, so the house that I live in, we've moved multiple times, and every time we have moved, we've always had problems. But this particular house that we're living in now, the previous owners did a lot of damage to the home when they left.
Okay.
They left against their will. Sorry for the racket. I'm going to try to get somewhere quiet.
No, you're fine.
But they come back on a yearly basis around Halloween. They actually come for Halloween every year since we've been in this house. And they always make very odd comments about the home. It's a little weird. It's a little uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
Have you, I don't want to sound ridiculous or anything, but have you ever had a case where maybe somebody has practiced something that they shouldn't be and has, if they left a place against their will, have
Curse the ground. Curse the location.
The next on the next coop. Yeah. On the next group coming in.
Yeah. I mean, I've not specifically had a case where the person left behind a curse to the location where when the next family moved in, they would suffer from it. But we have had cases similar in the sense that they either cursed an object that was left behind or the people coming in, cursed the family coming in. But it's perfectly possible. Any one of those scenarios, including the one that you're describing as a possible scenario. And that is, we talked about in the first part of this show how sexual abuse is one of the primary precursors to demonic oppression and possession. The second, believe it or not, is actual cursing, is black magic and witchcraft. Yeah. Evil witchcraft. And I want to make that distinction. That not all witchcraft is evil, but there are.
Yeah, I missed a little bit of the beginning of the program.
Okay.
So I didn't catch everything, and I'll have to go back and listen to it again with everything that I missed. I'm just trying to make heads or tails of what is going on around here, because ever since we've moved here, like the illnesses, the surgeries, and it's not just from one person, it's from multiple family members. And I mean, and the things that take years to be diagnosed, years and years to be diagnosed with. And then when you get this diagnosis, you're like, what? How was this missed all these years?
I do.
It's just,
I would say, this is the thing. And this is the reason we do it. You're bringing up a point. It's a good time to talk about it because I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with this subject, but it needs to be addressed because if we're going to be out there in a ministry helping people, we need to be willing to do whatever it takes. And sometimes you have to step outside the paradigm to do it. One of the ways in which we step out of our paradigm is that there are certain kinds of cases that we get, much like the one you're describing, that's not going to follow the traditional protocols that the normal normal exorcism ministry will work. Now, you can go in and bless a house, and that can help, and you can exorcise a house, and that can help. Those things, though, don't always remove curses, particularly if they are well-crafted curses. You typically have to counter a curse with the same tradition in which it was created. And that means that sometimes you need to step into the realm of what I like to call folk Catholicism, for lack of a better word, because we don't really have a formal term for it. But we have methods that we utilize to draw from some of the folk traditions that kind of have their origins outside of Christianity that are very effective for resolving these types of things. Now, Sister Mary Joan and I were actually talking about working some remedies to get our supply back up. And now you've given us a reason to do this, because what we can do is we can create a remedy that is specifically tailored to cleansing this environment that we can send to you, and then we can tell you how to apply it, and we can see if that helps.
Okay.
It's going to take us a while to do this, because we have to set a date, and it's a long, involved process, and we are flat out because we have used all of our remedies from the previous times. But we can create more, and we've been talking about creating more, and now we have a reason to create more, and this is something that we can send you. Yes, Joy, what would you like to contribute?
Oh, I make remedies as well, like candles and incense, and I interact with other spirits, and I've dealt with cases where people were doing magic in a house, and of course that affects the energy in the house, but also like tried to do something to the people. They were doing knot magic and had knots made out of string, but also clips and bits of clothing and hair from all the people in the house. So like I've worked resolutions like that, and I know I make remedies to help with things like that, because I've
let's do this. Let's do this. Caller, I'm going to leave this in your hands. I think Joy will be okay with this. Joy, if you don't mind, if you wouldn't mind giving your email address, and if the caller feels so inclined to reach out to you, you're moving to Las Vegas. You'll be able to actually maybe meet up and see if you can do something to help the situation. And certainly, when travel opens up again and I'm able to return to, going to Vegas, I would have no problem extending my stay by one day.
Before I get settled in, but I had no idea.
Hey, no pressure, Joy. We got your first mission for you.
Yeah, there you go, Joy.
I mean, I knew, I kind of felt this vibe, I'm going to get a case before I even get settled. I haven't even got my move.
Welcome to the work. But caller, it's no obligation to you, but if you feel comfortable and so inclined, Joy can give her email and then reach out to her. And then maybe, in a few weeks, you can hook something up and see if we can get that situation to calm down for you.
Yeah, I'd be grateful for any direction that I can go into, because, I've called in multiple times trying to get to learn something that, I can sit down with you for probably an entire day, and with the craziness that goes on in this house.
Yeah.
And since we've lived here, and it's just, sometimes I just bang my head up against the wall, and it's like, what is going on? Is this really happening? Or, you kind of, you question yourself after a little while, like, maybe we're just really all sick, or, physically ill or something. But I mean, just when you think, okay, you got over this one hurdle, and then, you get a phone call from the doctor's office for one of your kids, and you get slammed with something else, and you're like, wait a minute, where did this come from? We were fine before we moved here.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out what is going on. Is it,
it can even be as simple as the fact that the people that resided there before had some kind of negative attachment or just exuded a negative energy that brought the vibrational rate of that location down to such a degree that it's opened up the environment to malevolent activity. So it can be something as simple as that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a curse.
Like where I'm living, the people who lived here before me, it was an older woman, but she also had her daughter living here with her husband, and there was some kind of domestic situation, some kind of domestic violence thing, and the energy was left behind. And so
Yeah, you can feel it.
like it repeats once it's imprinted into the walls, stone tape
tape.
theory and all that. You know, it can affect everybody in the house by replaying through them.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because I know a little bit about how who was here before, and the person that owned the house was not a very nice person. And like I said, I've lived in different parts of Vegas before, and we did live in a certain area of town that for several years, our first home was in that little perimeter of where a lot of strange things occurred over several years. You guys did a case over there about
you're talking about Sin City exorcism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
And
a
so
very that neighborhood was very dark.
And the weird thing about it is that I didn't, you just kind of, you buy a home and you move in, and whether the home is new or not, you don't think anything of it. You just kind of, but strange things occurred then, and you couldn't figure it out, and you were questioning your mentality.
Well, it's not just a house,
then.
is it? I mean, houses are built on land, and so we've got no idea what's gone on that land before any house was built. A new house is not necessarily
Safe,
a bulwark against those things. And
Right.
It sounds in your instance like you've made a cocktail, because you've had spirit attachments that you had with you, and you've moved into a house that's got spirits there as well. And so it sounds like a bit of a cocktail that needs to be sorted.
Chaos going on.
And I know it started, I would see things before, even when I lived in Scotland, I had, you see things, you feel things, and you're like, okay, it's the fresh air or something. You have to make up an excuse, you know what I mean? And it just seems as years go by, and no matter where you end up, things just seem to get worse and worse and worse. But I mean, it's never been as bad as it has been since we've been in this home.
Well, I mean, I think Joy, what is the best email for her to maybe reach out to you at?
I would say joy@queenhuntress.com.
Okay, so joy@queenhuntress.com. And go ahead, call her and reach out to her, and then you can, discuss what needs to be done. And Joy is my student 4 years. She knows a lot of the methodologies that I've deployed, a lot of things that the laity can do. I would say Joy is operating at a level that's above the laity in that respect. She has a lot of theological training as well, but she also has access to a lot of my things. Like she has exercise. I think you still have exercise salt and holy water, exercise holy water for me, right?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have the exercise oil as well still?
Yes, I think I still have a little bit. I may need to get more once I get settled.
We can
definitely get more out to you, but go ahead and you know how to use those already. I would do that in addition to maybe some of your own remedies after you've had a chance to communicate and get some details and maybe work up a solution to counter whatever the effects are here. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a curse. It sounds a little bit like a curse, but it could just be residual negative energy from the previous activity.
Of course, I have my full plethora of all the paranormal equipment.
Yes, you could. I mean, I'll leave it to your discretion as to what you want to do, but you want to be in demonology? Well, here's your chance. Caller, thank you so much for calling in. And I hope that this helps you.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Good luck, sweetie. We'll be in touch.
And I will get in touch with you, Joan.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Sounds good.
Give us a call later on after you've had a chance to communicate, and then let us know how it goes.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless.
Well, there you go, Joy. See, you are still, you're still,
Baptism by
people
fire.
are still finding you. So this
I
is clearly
know.
your vocation.
It just happens.
Sister Mary Joan, what's our next question from the chat?
We had nothing real new. We had one back at 9:15 from Kiki. It had to do with when you were under spiritual attack, Joy. Give me a second to go find it. She says, Joy, you talked about attacking others. That's when it got severe. What were the attacks? Do you remember what you did or how it came about? Just kind of explain, what happened when you felt one coming on.
It was before I ever was involved with the bishop. There were other people that I was connected to, and there was a situation where we were afraid that some children might come to harm. And so I put a curse on someone, and it was, connected to a talisman, and they broke the talisman, which that's not how you dispose of that. So it went back and it backfired on everyone connected with the curse, including me. And so that was another thing that I did that was kind of dumb. To put it mildly. That's probably about the worst thing I ever did to anyone, actually. And it was because I was afraid somebody was going to hurt, some kids.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
That was what that was about. And, so I don't really go around attacking people. However, there was one incident I remember while I was wrestling with everything. And of course, I don't remember exactly when this took place, but I kind of suspect that maybe this is why why he had to put the apostolic binding on me. I was driving home and things were flying out of my mouth. I was so mad. I was so angry, and things were just coming out. And I said something about how I wanted to hurt the bishop. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I would never do that. And no, I wouldn't do that. But sometimes when I'm angry, I say things I don't mean. And if I divorce myself from those thoughts, they're going to create another tulpa. And what's that tulpa programmed to do? To make me hurt him. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that was why, because I told him, I had these thoughts and I was yelling these things and I don't know what I was doing. And I'm sure he probably saw that and said, we better stop this before it becomes another tulpa.
Well, I mean, we've seen the little Twitter drama that happened a few years ago where, I did. And I mean, we've talked about this, so it's not a big secret. But I did put an apostolic binding on Joy to prevent her from being able to use any kind of magical operations that she might not have been fully in control of. And this was at the peak of her Demon Factory experiences. And so it was the right thing to do. And she understood. And when she found out that this had happened, she was in perfect agreement that this was the right thing to do. And she could feel that it
was a great move.
Yeah, it was a great move, and it helped. And it got you back on track. And sometimes that's what needs to be done. Apostolic bindings are not something that are very common, but remember, in Scripture, the church was given the power to loose and bind, and sometimes we have to use both of those in the arsenal to protect people. It's just not something that's talked about very often.
Well, it's also a formalized a hierarchical version of a general exhortation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, actually, when Anglicans were actually Anglicans,
Now, Father Chris.
I'm sorry. I know converts are the worst. But when they were, exhortation was part of the Book of Common Prayer. The exhortation was read out before Eucharist, and there's nothing wrong with exhortation. That is about, are you at peace with man and God? Are you, involved in anything that you shouldn't be? This is actually, I mean, we've gone so far into permissiveness in our culture that somehow people think you're evil if you say, I don't think that's a good idea, or you shouldn't do that. They think that you're attacking them. I think, well, actually, no, exhortation, apostolic binding, that's all part of actually loving somebody. It's not about trying to control or restrict somebody's freedom. It's actually trying to ensure their freedom.
Well, sometimes you can see things that the other person can't see because they're in that state.
They're involved.
And
in
sometimes you have to step in and kind of pump the brakes for them before they crash into a tree.
Yeah, particularly when a person is not, spiritually stable. It's the best thing to do to protect them, but it's not harmful in any way other than the fact that it gives them actually some space.
It says a lot about Joy's, discernment, having found out about it. A lot of people would be very vindictive and angry about it, but she was like, no, I was wrong. Yeah, you should have done it.
I mean, so that is the remarkable
maturity.
It is. It's the remarkable thing.
Like, well, you guys suck.
Joy, one of the things I will say about Joy is that, she actually listens. When you teach something, and I think that's my pet peeve, is that so much of the work of an exorcist is really doing teaching. You're not really, sitting there doing prayers and expelling demons. And most of the time you're sitting there trying to educate people. But you're educating people in the things that they need to do and things that they might not be fully experienced in because they never actually spent any time learning what to do or learning about how to do it right. And that's not Joy. Most of the time when I come in and I feel like I'm it's just one ear and out the other with some clients, and it's very disheartening. You become disenchanted with the work very quickly because you look at it and you're like, what am I wasting my time for? No one ever listens. And the cases when you go in and you've spent all this time with this family, and you can tell the blank looks on their eyes when you tell them what needs to be done next, and they're not going to do it. And then 2 weeks later, you're getting a call. Nothing you did worked. Well, yeah, nothing I did worked because you didn't do anything I told you to do. That's not Joy. Joy actually takes everything you say to heart, and she finds a way to do it, even in the worst of times. So, I mean,
Bishop, I think this is connected to a question we've had from Facebook. So I want you to develop that a bit further. If
Let's
that's
go.
all right.
Let's go.
We got a question from Vera.
Okay.
And her question is, going to confession and having the Eucharist wouldn't get the dark spirit away. Which I think there's. So you might want to continue that kind of the answer to that question, which is partly about teaching as well.
Well, that's one of the first things that I tell people to do. And that's what shocks them because if they're not Catholic, they don't really think they need things like confession. Eucharist, they're a little more open to, and we do have an open communion in the Nicolaitan Church. So we do welcome Protestants to receive the Eucharist, provided that we give them some basic understanding as to what it is they're actually receiving.
We do too, as long as they believe what they're receiving.
Yes.
That's
the key. And I tell them, it's like, if you have uncertainties about this, then withhold, I can give you a blessing when you come up. But most of the time I like to, we have a general open communion as long as they understand what they're getting. And a lot of Protestants do actually. But confession, more difficulty getting people to accept that one. And that's actually, for spirit attachment, the far more powerful one. It really is. Not that the Eucharist isn't powerful, but the Eucharist works in collaboration with the grace that you cultivate. And so the effects of Eucharist are going to be completely proportionate to how much work you've done. And usually that's measured by how committed you are to repentance.
Because it's actually very passive. I mean, people are happy to receive communion.
Yeah.
But you have to go to confession.
You have to go to confession. And think about even general absolution. We start every mass off with general absolution. It's the start of it's to prepare ourselves to receive this sacred gift. But it's kind of like going to Eucharist alone is kind of like, you're trying to get a master's degree before you've graduated high school. You kind of have to go through the steps. It's always a process, and confession is a very powerful tool. I'll tell you a story, very short story, but one of my earliest cases when I started my collaboration with the Order of Exorcists, he wasn't exactly a non-Catholic. I think part of his family was Catholic. They had fallen away. It's something like that, if I recall correctly. But I said, I'd like to, start this off with confession. So he was agreeable, and we went into the chapel and closed the door. And this was back when I was seeing clients at my home. And we started, I started the confession. And he couldn't get even a couple words out before the demon was the only thing talking. And what the sacrament had done is it had drawn it out. And it was funny because the demon couldn't even talk coherently. It had been somewhat vexed by the sacrament. And all it could do is like make these utterances. And we went immediately into exorcism, pulled that son of a bitch out. And, he slowly healed through a year of counseling with me, pastoral counseling. But, that's an example of how this works. So yes, the short answer is yes. Most of the time, confession, 3 sacraments, reconciliation or confession, whichever word you prefer. Okay. Eucharist and unction. Those 3 sacraments are typically all that's required in most spirit attachments, even malevolent ones. It's really only the most serious cases of possession where you have to start going into exorcism as the last resort. And we use it as the last resort. I mean, seriously, it's minor exorcism we're a little bit more liberal with, but we're very, very conservative with how often we deploy the solemn rite of exorcism. Almost never. Great question. Sister Mary Joan, do we have any other ones?
We're caught up on questions, I believe, unless Father Chris saw some I might have missed.
Oh, there was a question from Father Chris Yates.
Oh, okay.
Father Chris Yates, could you answer that question, please?
Go for it, Father.
No, I can't answer it, but I can ask it.
All right, let's have
it. The question was, and it goes back to very early on in the first hour, that I'm a libertarian Leo, so am I screwed?
No,
but more seriously, I do want you to develop that, because I don't know much about star signs other than I used to use them to establish whether somebody was lying about their date of birth to me when I was a policeman. But other than that, I don't know anything about them.
Well, this guy had a lot of narcissistic tendencies, which I'm not going to say that's a Leo trait, because it's not. But people,
my daddy's a Leo.
He's
exactly opposite that.
Yeah, because Leo is ruled by the sun, and of course everything revolves around it. Mm. So Leos are thought to have this kind of attitude, and if you take that too far, the ego takes over, and you don't have a whole lot of ego.
Oh, I think I do. I wrestle with this a lot. I think. I mean,
he's like, no, you don't get it.
Yeah, no. I'm a terrible sinner. So I think.
Aren't we all?
I mean, that's why I was interested in what you had to say. I mean, I was genuinely interested, because I think, what attracts me to one of the things that attracts me to the priesthood is the idea that it's the priesthood that matters, not me. So, and that it's the sacraments that heal, it's God that heals, not me. Because actually that's a way to check narcissism.
Yeah.
To say it's not me, but no, that is all. I mean, no, you have a very wrong impression of me. It is a battle. That's why I was interested in the answer.
Well,
but
see,
carry on.
The other thing to keep in mind, though, I think about Leo is that what most people who are not familiar with astrology don't really understand about astrology is that the sun sign is one component of 3 primary components: your moon sign, your rising sign, that create the full picture, and then that's all flavored by your Mars, your Venus, all of them. So
the houses.
Yeah, and the houses too. And
I have my sun is in my first house that manifests through self. So I have, this huge personality. But if it had manifested, if instead I had been born several hours later and my sun was in the fourth house. I might be focusing on, like, maybe I want to be a mother, but thank God I don't have that. Anyway.
So the short answer is you're not screwed, Father Chris. You're not screwed. You're good. Calling in from Skype, we have Walter on the air. Hello, Walter.
Hey, Walter.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello,
We can
Father
hear you just
Walter.
fine.
How are you?
I am healthy and well, thank you, Father Chris.
Walter's a friend of mine.
Excellent.
A former colleague.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
excellent. Okay.
I didn't notice.
I am actually an Anglican priest.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I always find these things sort of interesting because, as Father Chris will have pointed out over many of your different sessions, a lot of Anglicans don't actually believe what they're supposed to believe, and there's always those moments where you sit back and realize you're an odd one out, like a functionally extinct species. But I think one of the intriguing things about, people asking about communion and coming forward for these sorts of things, is that when they come to us and ask for aid, or that they think they're weighed down, or that there's some sort of demonic activity, it's like actually they're just taking all this background negativity that everyone's throwing out, and they kind of carry it, like little strips of it just build up in their lives. And in some ways, they kind of leave it at the door when they come into church, or they're asking for help or whatever, or they invite you around to do, say, an exorcism. But it's not actually a demonic spirit. It's the negative energy that they've picked up from around them, that they've bought into, that they're feeding themselves. They tidy it away when you come around, because they want kind of the best place visible. And there's nothing there. And as you were saying, Bryan, that you try talking about, okay, what's going on? What are you doing? How do you act? If we do this, what's going to change? And very frequently, I realize that they're so used to the narrative of their story being so negative, so draining, if you're to be looking at them like having an aura with color, I mean, they're just brown because that's what they're so used to. They've just taken it all in, and they put it into every little aspect of their life. That any advice you give, or even when they come to the confession, you say, that's not an issue. You just let that go, move on, do this instead. They don't actually, it's like they don't always actually want to commit to the change that's needed. Because it's
hard.
It's too big a
Well, they
change,
develop a
too
dependency
hard.
on it of sorts.
Well, it kind of becomes them, doesn't it? I mean,
Right.
That's the
dependent
real
on it.
detriment. Yeah, it becomes their identity.
Yeah.
They identify as this. It's why I think the language of talking about survivors rather than victims of abuse is probably quite good, because it's far better to make being a survivor part of your personality than being a victim. And so. But I agree with Father Walter that some people really love their scars.
Oh, they do. We have cases all the time where people will get upset with us once we start to resolve the situation, particularly if it's a fast resolution. We go in, they're expecting, we've got the case that's going to really be the one that, stumps you. You're just going to be, you're not going to be able to fix this one. I'm beyond help. We've heard this over and over again. And then you go in and you start the resolution, they feel it, and they get angry at you for it because you're taking a part of their identity away, and they don't want it. They don't want that. And then there's those people that come to you looking for help who don't really want help. They want constant validation that they are something special because, I guess some demon picked them and that's like winning the lottery to them. I don't know. But it's true. And the negativity that Father Walter's, referencing, this is kind of what we were reflecting on before earlier about created demons. Because what you can do is when you create identity out of these things, you're giving life and sentience to these things, and these incorporeal things derive life from them, and they become living attachments that will affect you and permeate through your existence, and like you said, become part of identity. And when it reaches identity, go ahead.
Some of it. it's that thing that I was describing earlier when I said that I had these thoughts and I was so divorced from them being my thoughts.
Yeah.
I had to admit to myself that, yes, I say things I don't mean and I think things I don't mean when I'm angry. And I had to accept that about myself.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm going to keep othering these thoughts and say, that's not me. And I'm going to clutch my pearls and say, well, I'm a better person than this. I'm being attacked. No,
Right.
I can be a bitch when I'm angry. It's just who I am.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all?
I'm a bitch when I'm angry. I mean,
People are denying themselves, denying that that's really who they are, deep down, because they don't even want to look at their own shadow. And that's
I think it's worse than ever, though, Joy. I don't know. I think, but by that I mean it's every generation says, "Oh, we're the worst." What I mean is because people are now so used to manufacturing their identity on Facebook, on social media, that there's a sense of kind of a PR control over we think we can sort of manufacture who we are. And that these things just lead to mass confusion because we end up with so many sort of conflicting persona
right. Not healthy
that we can't hold it together. Like you always know, I mean, the couples that all of a sudden there's loads of pictures of them doing things together on Facebook. It normally comes just before they split up.
Yeah,
I was about to say they call it fake book for a reason.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But there's almost a sense that we're trying to will something to happen, will something to be. We want to will it into being, but actually we delude ourselves thinking we can control it, and we just end up. I mean, I speak from experience as well, and I'm not pointing the finger.
That's one of the reasons why confession is so important because it contains that self-examination. Right.
And why it can't be done online.
Yeah.
I mean, right. Seriously, I'm not just making a kind of casual point that confession has to be with a priest in person because it's so important because actually anything else that distances that encounter distorts it.
Oh, believe me, if we could figure out a way to do it in on Skype or something, we would because it'd be convenient.
Yeah,
but
I think we'd be very busy though.
We would in theory.
It's just not the way it's supposed to.
Not the way it requires that connection.
I think if we had invented Skype, then maybe that could have worked because actually it's about the headspace that the people are in when they come to us. Yeah. When they come into a little room for confession. It's specifically designed for that one function, that one activity.
Yeah,
they're already
that's true.
They're already entering into a realm of possibility just in that space. Whereas when you talk about Skype, that's how you socialize, that's how you do your work, and all of that is that image, that public image, and you've got to be. Okay, I'm doing it in inverted commas, which you can't see. You've got to be okay. You've got to be healthy and fine and well, because there's a superficial level to our society in nearly every engagement we have.
Yeah.
How many people truly respect the position of their clergy, the priest, and what the priest represents? So when they go to confession, when they're seeking reconciliation, is it a habitual thing? Is it simply a commodity that they've bought into? Or are they really coming to you to actually hear the truth? Now,
I think there's part of that, Father, is, and I know you and I both experienced this. I mean, we were ordained young and looked younger than we were. And so, and a lot of people, I kind of get it on one level, but older people think, well, I can't confess to this person. He's like my grandchild, right. How can I call him father? He's like my grandchild. And on a very basic level, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I'm not trying to say that they're evil in saying that, but actually, if we understand the priesthood, we know why why that's not an issue, and that in fact, because what else goes with that? You'd have to say, well, unless this person's perfect, I can't confess to them. How could I confess to a sinner? Or that priest's a hypocrite. I know he is. He's divorced. He's whatever it might be.
Well, that's the argument that people use to not go to confession. I don't need some priest. I'll just go to Jesus. That's the attitude.
But actually, the opposite is true. The divine mandate has been given to man.
Yeah, Jesus set it up this way. You have a problem with it? Take it up with Jesus. He's the one that set it up this way.
and therefore, there is something that we have to say is of divine intention, origin, in having imperfect vessels being the vessels of His grace.
Yeah,
jars of clay, as St. Paul called us.
And if you actually talk to another human being, no, I don't mean your private prayers to God. When you actually talk to a human being, the stuff that's going on inside suddenly becomes real because it's public. In some ways, it becomes a public narrative, even if it's just private in a private conversation. Something real about
you put it out
it's
there.
no longer hidden, shadow.
There's power in names.
And I think that's one of the things that people don't like about it. And also, a lot of people, because it's been, like for Roman Catholics, programmed into them to go to confession. Oh, forgive me, Father, for I sinned. Oh, what did you do? Oh, I had a bad thought about my cat because it woke me up. No, try again.
I better go to confession every day then.
Well, Father Walter would never need to go to confession because he's very devoted to his cats.
Oh, well, there you go.
But it's a lot easier. But it's that way we've allowed people to have that superficial relationship with these deep sacraments, that transforming sacraments, and they don't see the importance of them, and we keep in some ways encouraging them. I don't know. Maybe it's because a lot of the clergy stopped believing. Because we don't sit back and say, "Ooh, come on, no, that's not sin. That's not something you should be confessing." Well,
I think what's happened is we've lost the power of the sacrament. I mean, the word that's used by St. Paul when he talks about the power of God is dynamos. It's dynamite. It's where we get the word dynamite from Greek, and I think that when it comes to confession, there's both an over familiarity, and familiarity breeds contempt on the one hand of the ones that from the age of 9 have been disciplined to do that. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, with the discipline of confession. It's a good thing as long as it's not over familiar and trite. And on the other hand, the vast majority of the world for whom the idea of confession is either an unknown or so unpalatable and confronting that it's to be rejected. And I think the work of the church and catechesis of people like us is to help people see the beauty of it. And we go back to that discussion on forgiveness, that actually forgiveness is divine, and what helps us to forgive other people is to know that we're not perfect ourselves. Because often the human reaction to being to our own sin is to say, "But they're a worse sinner, so I'm okay." And actually the healing comes where we go, we're all sinners. Some people have wronged me and I've wronged some people and I've wronged God. And there's a dynamite, a power in the sacrament of confession. And it's not just left hanging there. It's not just confession. It's reconciliation. It's reconciliation with God. Confession is the key, but what the reward is reconciliation, to be made right.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, Father Walter, thank you so much for calling into the show tonight. We really appreciate your input.
Thanks, Father.
Thank you, Father.
Yes.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
God bless.
We are now at a point where, let's see here, we might be, let me make sure that, there's no, okay. There was one question in the chat room that I think we have time for before we close up for the night.
Yeah.
It's Kiki. She says, we've been talking a lot about demons.
And on a lighter note.
Have we, we can end on a lighter note. Have any of us experienced angels. And Joy, I think you have a great story about this, and I want the show to close out on your story. So go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, I've encountered a few beings I thought might be angels, but my favorite encounter was I was hanging out outside my building. I lived in downtown Denver, and it was all studio apartments in the building. So they didn't allow smoking indoors, and I used to smoke cigarettes. I quit several years back, but I was outside just hanging out and meeting some of the other people that were hanging out in the back doing that, you know. And this guy comes along and he walks up. He's wearing he's wearing a pair of pants, but that's all he has. He doesn't have a shirt. He doesn't have shoes. And he just starts talking to us, and he's like telling stories, and it's all a jumble of words. Like if you take the sentence and put it in a bag and pull each word out, all of the words that mean things are there, but they're not in the right order. So after a while, the girls that were hanging out just thought, you know, I don't want to be around this guy, but I kept talking to him and, you know, listened to the story he was trying to tell. And at some point he, you know, said that he was going to go along, but he wondered if I had a shirt. And I was like, yeah, hang on, I'll go get you a shirt. And so I went inside. You know, he also asked for shoes, and I was like, well, I don't have any shoes in your size. It wouldn't have occurred to me. So I go inside and I go looking for shirts, and I had already started putting things in storage back then because I was hoping to move somewhere like this. And so I come back out, you know, the only t-shirt that I could find was my favorite t-shirt, and I hated to part with it, but as soon as I saw it, I knew I had to give him that one. Mm-hmm. It was like a feeling in my heart. I knew I had to give him that one. So I came back out and gave him the shirt, and he said he was going to, you know, he thanked me and put it on, and he said he was going to leave it, you know, after a certain period of time somewhere near the dumpsters. And I said, no, you keep it. It's your shirt now. Yeah. And in the most clear sentences he ever said in the entire thing, he put his hand on my shoulder. You know, I was telling him I needed to write some essays, had to write 3 essays about Jesus. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, you'll get A's on all 3 of them. He walked down the alley and vanished before my eyes.
Let's see. And see, that covers actually the
awkwardness.
The awkwardness, yes. Remember, when you meet an angel, they're always awkward, almost like they just can't do human very well because they can't. They also will touch you because that's usually because they convey some kind of grace, which is a necessary part of why they're there in the first place. And the other thing that they tend to do is they will come out of nowhere and disappear just as quickly. So it's like you turn and they're gone, and you're like, how could they have gotten away so quickly? I can guarantee that most of you have had multiple encounters with angels. Now, I'm not talking just to my guests tonight and our co-hosts and everything. I'm talking everyone listening. You know, you have had numerous encounters with angels and you never knew it. You never knew it. Some of them fake being human better than others. And they do have, I guess with the grace of God, an ability to have a limited time of corporeality to be able to interact with us in time. But that's typically what you'll encounter I've had that encounter numerous. I've seen angels working in the field, in disguise as humans. I've seen that. I've had experienced that, as Joy described. Now, I've also had the pleasure of being able to see them in their more glorified natural state, which is not, again, a corporeal state. And it's awe-inspiring, and it's incredible. It's only happened a couple times in my life, but those times have definitely shaped who I am today. So all good stuff. Joy, thank you so much for being on Vestiges again. We'll do this again. Father Chris. Totally. Yeah, Father Chris, Sister Mary Joan, thank you. Yep. Absolutely. We'll be back next week with a brand new Vestiges. We'll be talking about UFO disclosure. with Erica Lukes. You don't want to miss this. She is a expert in UFO research and also Skinwalker Ranch. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that too. So check us out. That's next week, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, I'll see you all out there in the ether. God bless.